In many ways, Orange City has always been a town that has marched to the beat of its own drum. Whether it's the architecture, the windmills, the kissing Dutch kids, the Tulip Festival, the residents of this town have always relished their Dutch heritage. Perhaps it's that very heritage, as descendants of countless generations of farmers and sailors, traders and craftsmen, engineers, fishermen and warriors. Perhaps it's that history of pushing back the sea through the sheer force of their own will and growing crops where they didn't belong. Perhaps it's those qualities of gritty toughness and stubborn determination that lent itself so perfectly to Orange City's rich history of military service. This wall stands as a testament to their sacrifices and a constant reminder that the freedoms we sometimes take for granted are by no means free. While every name on this monument represents someone who gave some, 22 of Orange City's service members laid down their very lives for this ideal. So today, on this day of remembrance, let us take a moment to see their faces and hear their stories, lest we forget. Born a middle child to a newspaper worker and his wife, John Cornelius Pressman showed an affinity for carpentry, earning him a job assisting local contractor Jacob Ypma before the draft came calling. After training at Camp Dodge, John was deployed to France, where he fought in 3 battles in an effort to dislodge German forces from the north bank of the Veyle River during the Battle of Fiemme. While he survived the first 2 unharmed, it was in the 3rd battle, on the 10th of August 1918, while advancing under heavy fire, that he was struck in the abdomen by a German bullet. He was rushed to a field hospital, but his wound proved fatal. Soon after, the Orange City American Legion Post 329 adopted John Pressman's name in his honor. He was 22 years old. Gerrit Arthur ter Horst was the youngest son of Dutch immigrant farmers and spent his childhood learning the value of hard work. His education, centered around his Reformed upbringing, began at the Orange City Christian Elementary School and concluded at Northwestern Classical Academy, which would later be known simply as Northwestern College. His Army career began in January of 1943 with training at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, followed by time in Pennsylvania and New York, before shipping off to England during the build-up to D-Day. On June 6, 1944, a date that lives in legends, Gerrit was part of the mighty armada crossing the English Channel. His destination was Omaha Beach, the most heavily fortified of the 5 Normandy landing areas. His mission as a combat engineer was to clear sectors Dog Red and Easy Green of mines and other obstacles to allow men, tanks, and other equipment to cross the beach. But he never got there. Gerrit was killed while still on his boat before he could ever set foot on Normandy soil, joining the 4,400 other Allied troops who lost their lives that day. He was 24 years old. Charles William Van Gelder grew up on a farm north of Orange City. A middle child with 9 siblings, he joined the Army Air Forces and was stationed at Lai Airfield in New Guinea as a member of the 304th Aerodrome Squadron, whose job it was to maintain the airfield. On July 21, 1944, he wrote home to his family, a letter that would prove to be his last. During a break from his duties 3 days later, Charles took a swim in local waters, likely underestimating the potential dangers compared to local swimming holes back home. Although the exact circumstances are unclear, at one point his head disappeared beneath the waters and did not resurface. He was 21 years old. Born in Chicago in February 1911, Calvin Chester Postma was the oldest service member on this list at the time of his passing. When he was still just a child, his family moved to Ironton, then later to Alton, where he graduated high school. As an adult, he lived in Orange City, processing chickens at the local broiler plant before building indoor heaters for the Silent Sioux Oil Burner Corporation. He joined the Army in September of 1943, receiving his training at Camp Fannin, Texas, and was deployed to France via England a mere 11 days after the Allies had made their Normandy beachhead. His duty as a platoon runner was vitally important, tasking him with carrying messages between various units in the field during those hectic early days. But as important as it was equally dangerous. On July 2nd, 1944, he wrote a letter to his wife, Leona. By the time it had reached her, however, Calvin Postma had met his end. He was 33 years old. Born and raised on a farm north of Orange City, John Alvin Vanderbrake was the eldest of 5 siblings. In between working his father's farm, he got his education at Sioux Center High School, graduating class of 1939. He joined the Army in November of 1942, training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And like Calvin Postma, he was one of the waves of troops deployed to mainland Europe in the weeks after D-Day. On the 1st of September 1944, during the intense fighting for control of France, John Vanderbrake met his end. He was 23 years old. After graduating from Orange City Academy, Alan Costas said goodbye to his family of 9 and took the train to Bay City, Michigan, where he worked as a welder for Defoe Shipbuilding Company. His welding skills were put to good use in November of 1942 when he joined the Air Corps and trained as a plane mechanic at Seymour Johnson Field, North Carolina, then as an engineer and gunner at Arizona's Kingman Army Airfield. By October of the next year, he had flown in 24 combat missions, earning him the Air Medal. On the 5th of October 1944, Tech Sergeant Costas took off in a B-17 Flying Fortress on his 32nd mission, most likely from Tortella Airfield in southeastern Italy, bearing north towards Germany. Soon after takeoff, the entire left wing burst into flames, quickly spreading and beginning to eat its way through the bomb bay wall. While the rest of the crew parachuted to safety, Allen stayed aboard to buckle parachutes onto the 2 pilots, Joseph Fox and Francis Woods, as they battled to keep the plane in the air. They eventually lost the battle, and the 3 plummeted to the earth, sharing their final moments together as brothers in arms. Allen's actions, along with Lieutenants Fox and Woods, saved several lives that day, and posthumously earned him the Distinguished Service Cross, the Army's 2nd highest award for valor. He was 25 years old. Glenn Howard Byer was blessed with an idyllic youth, with his free time outside of farm work well spent in the community. In 1939 alone, he took a road trip to Yankton, South Dakota with friends, was the best man at his pal William Vogelar's wedding, and starred as John Wilde in the play The Stranger Passes. His first job was at the Orange City branch of W.C. Koyman's chain of grocery stores, followed by a similar position at the Piggly Wiggly in Sioux City. He volunteered for the Army in February 1941, most likely training at Central Iowa's Camp Dodge. He was stationed at Fort Mills on the small but strategically crucial island of Corregidor at the mouth of Manila Bay. But in early 1942, with the U.S. Pacific Fleet largely crippled by the Pearl Harbor attack, the Japanese used the opportunity to capture the island. The defenders of Fort Mills, bomb-blasted, starving, and out of ammo, surrendered. Glenn became a prisoner at Nichols Field, which the Japanese converted into a POW camp. For 2.5 years, his family anguished as only an occasional postcard from him served as a fragile lifeline of hope. On October 11, 1944, Glenn and 1,781 other Allied POWs were loaded onto the Arison Maru, one of several Japanese transports whose conditions were so abjectly horrifying they were nicknamed Hell Ships. After 2 miserable weeks crammed into the ship's hold, the ship was torpedoed by an American submarine. As they abandoned ship, the Japanese cut the rope ladder to the hold, trapping the POWs below deck. But through grit and teamwork, a few managed to climb through the hatch and drop a rope for the rest. Once on deck, several men attempted to swim to the nearby Japanese destroyers, only to be pushed back by long poles and eventually gunfire. At 7:40 p.m., approximately 2.5 hours after the torpedo attack, the Arison Maru sank, scattering the POWs into the sea, clinging to whatever buoyant objects they could find. But the water was frigid and rough, and as the night progressed, men's shouts became groans, which one by one gave way to silence. Of the 1,781 prisoners who entered the sea that evening, 9 survived. Glenn Beyer was not one of them. He was 24 years old. Born in the tiny hamlet of Middleburg, Herman Garrett Vanderwilt showed an affinity for numbers, graduating from Orange City's Northwestern Junior College before earning his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Iowa. He used his education to land a position at Northwestern State Bank, where he was a bookkeeper and later a window teller. When the Army came calling, Herman left his wife, a school teacher named Matilda, and their 2-year-old daughter, Glenda, for Camp Grant, Illinois. From there, he served stateside for 6 months, likely in a clerical capacity, before coming home on furlough. Their second child, a son named Harold, was conceived during that time. A son who would never meet his father. On July 1st, 1944, while en route to his new deployment at the archipelago of New Caledonia in the South Pacific, he took ill, probably with meningitis, and was returned to the Army Hospital in San Francisco. After being transferred to Topeka, Kansas, Matilda was able to visit her husband for a few days. Upon her arrival home, she received a telegram that Herman had died of complications. He was 32 years old. Donald Eugene Wassenaar was a farm boy with a proclivity for athletics, especially basketball, allowing him to letter in the sport during his time at Orange City High School and Northwestern College. When he wasn't in school, he performed farm labor for landowners in nearby Newkirk and Granville. He was inducted into the Army in June of 1943, initially training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, then at Fort George Meade, Maryland, and Camp Jackson, South Carolina. His training was complicated by 3 separate hospitalizations, totaling 3.5 months. Finally cleared for deployment, he was sent to the region of Marseille as part of a field artillery team. After 7 weeks of fighting, on November 12, 1944, Donald was digging a foxhole to sleep in when a German artillery shell burst directly overhead, killing him instantly. He was 21 years old. A relative latecomer to Orange City, Herman Theodore Vanderline grew up both in Sheldon and later in rural Morris, where his affinity for the theatrical arose in the form of his role as Hem in the public school play, The Kidnapping of Santa Claus, and even well into his early 20s with the comedy The Campbells Are Coming with a local community theater. When Uncle Sam came calling, he shipped off to Camp Barkley, Texas in April of 1942, later returning on furlough to marry his fiancée, mathematics teacher Marcia Thompson, before setting off again to California's Desert Training Center, and finally to Fort Dix, New Jersey. He was shipped to England where he was able to spend 40 hours with his younger brother Marion, himself a member of the Army Air Corps. A few months later, Herman landed on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, after which he spent 7 months in continuous combat while serving in George Patton's legendary 3rd Army. His extensive training served him well, earning him several promotions in quick succession, as his unit battled its way to Dillingen on the southwestern edge of Germany, where, on December 15, 1944, his company was pinned down by a pair of pillboxes containing MG-42 machine guns. Wasting no time, Herman led his platoon on a flanking maneuver, capturing one of the pillboxes and taking its entire crew of 8 alive. At this time, the other pillbox realized what had happened and adjusted their fire, pinning them down a second time. Herman ordered his men to stay put before crawling unseen towards the enemy position, stopping a mere 20 feet away before killing the 2-man machine gun crew with his M1 carbine. The remaining 23 occupants immediately surrendered, but not before a German sniper located Herman van der Laan and fired. For his gallantry on the field of battle, the Silver Star, the Army's third highest military decoration for bravery, was posthumously presented to his widow, who herself had since joined the Women's Army Corps. He was 26 years old. These 4 young men, Arnold Vanderwilt, Willard Vandermotten, George Diener, and James Neuendorp, also appear on the memorial of the next-door town of Alton. In the interest of brevity, I invite you to click on this thumbnail at the end of the video, or on the link in the description below, to hear their stories. As the family's youngest child, Henry Anthony Costers grew up within the shadow of his older brothers, but no sooner was the ink dried on his diploma from Northwestern College in May of 1943, was Henry whisked off to northern Idaho's Farragut Naval Training Station for boat training, followed by a stay at Camp Shoemaker near Dublin, California, before shipping off to the Pacific. After a year at sea, Seaman Costers was aboard the Fletcher-class destroyer, the USS Spence, operating as part of the Fast Carrier Task Force near Manila, Philippines. On the 17th of December 1944, Spence attempted to refuel in the face of worsening storm conditions. The next day, an inaccurate weather report prompted the task force to steer straight into the teeth of the Category 5 super typhoon Cobra. The fleet was tortured by winds of up to 160 miles per hour, none more so than the Spence, whose inability to refuel left it dangerously top-heavy. The ship took on massive amounts of water, shorting out its electrical system and flooding its smokestacks, causing the engines to fail and locking its rudder in place. The ship listed so hard to port that it capsized, pulling nearly its entire crew to the bottom. In his final moments, Henry perhaps turned his thoughts to the visits that both of his older brothers had made to his ship. His oldest brother, William, and his beloved brother, Alan, the same Costers family who had lost a son just 10 weeks prior, was forced to endure the unthinkable to sacrifice a second son to war. Soon after, the Orange City Legion Post 329 elected to change its name to Pressman Costers in honor of this unimaginable sacrifice. He was 20 years old. A farm boy and the baby of the family, Neil Henry Yeager had to grow up quickly when at the age of only 12, liver cancer stole his mother away from him. He graduated from the Orange City Christian School and attended First Reformed Church. Neil's good looks and charismatic personality caught the attention of Catherine Cleveringa from nearby Alton, but Uncle Sam came calling, sending Neil on a whirlwind tour of 14 different camps and bases over the next 27 months. Neil's natural inclination towards the mechanical allowed him to rapidly rank up to a T5 position as a driver in a tank squadron. His first furlough in May 1943 allowed him to finally accomplish what had been delayed for 18 months. They were able to see each other 2 more times, including a visit by Catherine to South Carolina to support Neil as he recovered from 2nd and 3rd degree burns from an accidental flash fire. He arrived in France in July 1944 and attached to the Spearhead Division, which began to push the Germans back. After several months of hard fighting, he passed through Belgium, encountering many displaced Dutch civilians, whom he delighted in speaking to in their own language. On September 5th, Neil's tank was threatened by an approaching German armored column. Neil and a second man grabbed a bazooka, hid behind a hedgerow, and ambushed the lead tank when it was mere feet in front of him, stopping the advance in its tracks. This act of heroism earned him the Bronze Star, which was personally pinned to his jacket by Major General Maurice Rose. Later, on December 23, 1944, during the Ardennes Offensive, perhaps better known by its nickname, the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last desperate gamble to stop the Western Allies, the tank Neil was commanding was attempting to take a German-held town when an enemy Panzerschreck team fired into the right flank of the vehicle, killing him instantly. He was 25 years old. The youngest child of a traveling preacher, Gerald Bosch was born just over the Minnesota border in a small town before moving to Morris as a child. He worked as a farm laborer, graduating from Morris High School before continuing his education at Northwestern College, graduating with a 2-year degree in May of 1943. 2 days following his graduation ceremony, still at the tender age of 18, Gerald promised himself to his best friend and schoolmate, Helen Van Persum, before being whisked off by the Army to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas for boot training, followed by Stillwater, Oklahoma, engineering training at the University of Missouri, and finally Camp Rucker, Alabama. On the 24th of December 1944, Sergeant Bosch boarded the SS Leopoldville, a Belgian passenger liner converted to military use, and set sail from England to France to reinforce beleaguered Allied forces who had been taken by surprise during the Battle of the Bulge. But even on Christmas Eve, there were predators in the waters of the English Channel. A German U-boat, the U-486, struck the Leopoldville on its starboard side. A series of mishaps ensued, resulting in 800 men either going down with the ship or dying from injuries and hypothermia. Gerald's precise fate is unknown, but he didn't leave the frigid water that day. He was 20 years old. Garrett Henry Gaysink lived a nondescript life in the years before World War II. A simple country life of farm chores and schooling at Western Christian High School in the nearby town of Hull. All of this changed when he joined the Army mere hours after graduation, which sent him off to Camp Fannin, Texas, Camp Carson, Colorado, and finally to eastern Oklahoma's Camp Gruber, before deploying to Europe to help push back the Germans during the waning days of the Ardennes Offensive. After a month of bitter fighting, Private Gaysink's 9th Infantry Division participated in the Battle of Aachen, a 5-week-long battle for the critical German city just across the western border. It was during this fighting, on the 1st of February 1945, that Garrett Gaysink gave all. He was 18 years old. Lloyd Ira Vandenberg's life was struck a cruel blow when his father, Peter, succumbed to lung cancer, leaving his mother, Jenny, in charge of their 4 children and the family farm near Carnes. 2 years later, in December of 1943, Lloyd answered the call, leaving his mother's side for Camp Blanding, Florida, and later to Camp Meade, Maryland, before sailing to England in July 1944. From there, Lloyd fought in France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany as part of the 70th Tank Battalion of General Patton's 3rd Army. During this time, he wrote home to his fiancée, Arlene Beltman, sending her a souvenir in the form of an Army insignia, snatched from a dead German officer's uniform. In November of 1944, Lloyd used quick reflexes and a little luck to cheat death when the tank that he was driving was struck by an anti-armor weapon. The tank burst into flames, but Lloyd escaped through the top hatch unscathed. Private Vandenberg's luck would run out 3 months later, however, when he was killed on German soil on the 2nd of March, 1945. He was 21 years old. A minister's son, Frederick Cooper Jr., showed an interest in teaching early in life, earning his bachelor's in education from Indiana's Manchester University. There, he met and courted Mary Fish, herself an education major, who quit school early to marry Fred and moved to Ames. Soon, Fred, Mary, and new baby Rebecca arrived in Orange City, to take a job at the high school, teaching PE, social studies, and coaching basketball. It was there that his reputation for kindness and a complimentary nature was cemented within the community. His gracious nature was even such that, when seeing the number of his students, both current and former, being drafted, he decided to join the military voluntarily, despite his position as a teacher largely exempting him from the draft. As a member of the Navy Reserves, he was shipped to the Pacific Theater, where he was a gunnery officer, tasked with maintaining the various weapon systems of whatever vessel he was aboard. On the 17th of February 1945, that craft was the USS LCI-449, a landing craft modified with a heavier arsenal. The ship was part of a large armada surrounding the island of Iwo Jima, which contained a force of 21,000 heavily dug-in Japanese troops. After heavy bombardment, a flotilla of 7 gunboats, including the 449, attempted to land underwater demolition teams, the predecessors of the Navy SEALs, on the island. But the Japanese were ready. At about 500 yards out, the boats came under blistering fire. The 449 was hit first, a mortar round exploding on the ship's bow, blowing Ensign Cooper into the unforgiving sea. While Iwo Jima was eventually captured, it came at a high cost, including that of Frederick Cooper, whose body was never recovered. 2 years later, in honor of Fred's memory, Mary Cooper went back to Manchester University and finished her teaching degree. He was 24 years old. Born on a farm 10 miles north of Orange City, John Marion Hubers showed an enterprising personality from an early age. In his teens, he went to work for John Brink at his local shoe store, but he was already co-owning the place by 18. After graduating from Northwestern, he was sent to St. Louis to attend master shoe fitting classes at the Dr. Scholl Training School. He eventually decided that a lifetime of selling shoes was not for him, opting instead for a degree in chemistry from Coe College in Cedar Rapids, class of 1940. In the hopes of a career in undertaking, he married Betty Gold in December of 1941, a union that would produce a daughter, Jonna. He then joined the Army Air Corps, learning the intricacies of both flights and aerial photography at Will Rogers Field, Oklahoma City in 1942. Over the next 3 years, John Hubers rapidly rose in rank as he flew an assortment of planes both stateside and abroad, including a low-flying sortie over his parents' farm in a B-17 Flying Fortress, snapping a picture of it along the way. Overseas, his responsibilities were both numerous and varied, including flying the India-China Ferry, which delivered supplies over the Himalayas to Chinese resistance fighters. On October 6, 1945, the war had been over for more than a month, and Lieutenant Colonel Hubers had made it through. But in a cruel twist of fate, a mysterious mechanical failure sent his P-38 Lightning hurtling into the Burmese soil. He was 28 years old.
BJ was greatly affected by 9/11. He was a junior in high school when that all happened. And I can remember him coming home from school and saying to me that he felt like he wanted to help. He wanted to do something. And I told him, you can graduate high school, go to college, become an upstanding citizen, become a voter. That's where my brain as a mom was headed. I think he knew then already that that wasn't going to be good for him. So he just smiled and nodded at me and went on his way. And he was very involved in school. He was on the football team. He was his senior year co-captain of the wrestling team. But the summer between his junior and senior year, he called me at work and said, Mom, we have someone coming to talk to us tonight. And it was a Marine recruiter. Interesting branch of service to try to get into, and he knew he was going to have to be physically fit as he possibly could be. When he graduated from high school the next year, then he actually left July 29 for basic training. He graduated from basic that October and proposed to his girlfriend at that time. And so we started to plan a wedding. Little did we know we were going to get taught real fast what the military was like. He had his first assignment in a training mission in Australia. That is where he went first. He was actually stationed at K-Bay in Hawaii. As he was in Australia, he got his orders for Afghanistan. He got home the night before the wedding, and then we went ahead and had a wonderful wedding and enjoyed each other. And he and Miranda left for Hawaii a week later. He was actually with her for 2 weeks before he shipped out for Afghanistan and left her there under her own means. So she became a very strong young married woman very quickly. So he was in Afghanistan for 7 months and came back changed. We saw a definite change on him at that point. He took on the role of a protector of our family. He believed wholeheartedly in what he did in Afghanistan. I can remember him telling me, "Mom, I fought beside some of the bravest men I've ever met. They have nothing left and they're still willing to fight." While he was in Afghanistan, he was home for a time, and he got to choose his next assignment, and he chose Iraq. He said that he wanted to do what he was trained to do, and that was doing combat. He felt like that's where his instincts were the best, and he did keep moving up in ranks. He was very good at what he did. And so he left in March, shortly after his 21st birthday, for Iraq. And then the communication was much more difficult when he was in Iraq. He was in an area which he, of course, did not admit to us until later that it was a very hot area. And so May 22 is the day that is probably embedded in our brains for the rest of our lives. We were actually getting ready for another wedding. Our oldest daughter was getting married on July 22, and I came home from work, and both Cody and our 16-year-old daughter, Katie, came out of the house. And I can still hear Cody say to me, "Mom, I need you to take a big breath." And walked into my kitchen, and there were 2 Marines standing there. The Marine Corps was wonderful during that time because, very honestly, our world stopped between the community here in Sioux Center and between our church family. They just picked us up and carried us. So you try to move forward, and from there we went to hours of visitation because it was a military funeral. So there were hundreds and hundreds of people. The next day was his funeral, and it was at the high school because there was nowhere else big enough to hold everyone. They estimate close to 1,400 people, which it was quite awe-inspiring. Came out of the funeral, and I remember all of the motorcycles and escorting us. And then we couldn't figure out why they were taking us down Highway 75 to get to the cemetery, because the cemetery could have been gotten there by back streets. But our lines into our streets in Sioux Center here was filled with people with flags. Once again, that support was just they don't always understand what that did for us. After that, your life just is never the same. I don't think anyone that loses a child is ever the same. Losing them in a military setting, you realize you don't get the privilege of grieving alone. The whole country, the whole community was grieving him also. Since then, how people don't forget him and don't forget his sacrifice is amazing to us. His wife is now the mother of 2 and has remarried, and it took her a long time, but she did. She is still in our lives. Her 2 children call us Grandma and Grandpa, and they are definitely in our lives, and they will continue to be in our lives. So we're extremely fortunate for that, because BJ left her for us. People don't always realize that what we have here in this country isn't perfect, but it's still free, and it comes at a cost, and some of us pay that price daily. I volunteer with Midwest Honor Flight as a healing thing for me. The veterans feel like I do so much for them, they have no idea what they do for me. So when one of them hugs me, I definitely feel my boy. He believed wholeheartedly in what he did, and he would change anything, and because of that, we wouldn't change anything either. But if people want to believe we don't miss him, we miss him all the time.